131. Biblical Military Laws. Chalcedon Position Paper number 131, March 1991. There is much humanistic opinion in our time with respect to warfare, and too little biblical thought. Humanistic opinions wander between two poles. Human life is absolutized so that killing in warfare, or killing murderers by legal executions, is seen as morally wrong. Such a view divinizes human life and makes any taking of life evil. Others have held that reasons of state can validate war, which means the divinization of the state as absolute. The biblical view does not permit any surrender of the sovereignty of God and the rule of His law. God's justice must govern all things, including man and the state. The biblical rules of war are analogous to the rules of defense of one's life and property. If a man breaks into a house, he can be killed if necessary without any blood guiltiness. If, however, the breaking and entering is in daylight, any unwarranted killing of the criminal incurs blood guiltiness. The house in such laws includes also the barn. Exodus chapter 22, verses 1 to 4. In warfare, essentially a defensive purpose is normal. Men are soldiers, in biblical law, who are aged 20 upward, as long as they are able-bodied. Numbers chapter 1, verses 2 and 3, verse 18, 20, verse 45, chapter 26, verses 2 and 4. Family concerns took priority over a military draft. A new vineyard or a new house was grounds for exemption. The future of the family was the basic defense. Similarly, a newlywed man had a year's exemption. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 1, verses 5 to 8, chapter 24, verse 5. The clergy were exempt. Numbers chapter 1, verses 47 following. They were constantly engaged in the wars of the Lord against sin and evil. There had to be a formal declaration of war, preceded by peace negotiations. Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 10 to 12. There is an important case law in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verses 19 and 20, which forbids destroying the enemy's fruit trees, a means of ongoing life. This meant that if fruit trees were spared, non-combatants were also. The only exemption to this law was with regard to certain Canaanite peoples whom God had sentenced to death. Israel was ordered to execute God's sentence. This was not an aspect of normal legal strategy. A very central aspect of law with respect to both peace and war is God's law against any alliance with any nation which rejects God and His covenant. This non-alliance requirement is a radical one. No marriage with unbelievers, and no peacetime or wartime alliances with ungodly nations. Exodus chapter 23, verses 31 to 33, chapter 34, verses 12 to 16, Deuteronomy chapter 7, verses 1 to 4. St. Paul sums up this law in these words: Be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. This law is now routinely disregarded. In Saudi Arabia, U.S. troops reportedly cannot have specifically Christian chapel services, display crosses or wear them, organize among themselves Bible studies, and so on. As Commander-in-Chief, President George Bush has de-Christianized the chaplains and the troops. The U.S. Army has been plainly separated from biblical faith on even the most voluntary basis. There is another aspect of war, an especially grim one, that marks modern warfare. Modern declarations of war are not like warfare in the past, such as in the 18th century. Since the French Revolution, and with the US Civil War, we have seen the rise of total war. War is not only waged against the enemy, but against one's own population. The enemy's civilian population is subjected to air raids and massive obliteration bombing to destroy all morale at home. Christians have become as much a military target, where possible, as are the armies. Each country, however, has also waged a hidden war against its own people. This is done by means of controls as a wartime measure, which are then retained in some degree with the coming of peace. Modern warfare has thus become a major means of effecting social change. In fact, it must be said that the historic forms of revolution, such as the French and Russian revolutions, are no longer as successful nor as common. We now have a new fact: war as revolution. The losing country usually faces a change of leadership, some kind of revolution. The winners, however, are also subjected to a thorough revolution by means of the vast growth of statism during the war. A good history of the 20th century could be written under the title, War as Revolution. This fact has made war more welcome than ever to some social thinkers. It enables the state to make changes which would otherwise be impossible in many cases. There is thus an entrenched predisposition to war among many in the political sphere. It needs to be stressed that this predisposition is political, not military. It is a silly myth that holds that military men want war. Such has rarely been the case. In war, it is men in the military who are certain to be shot at. It is the high-ranking officers who can lose their reputations and end in disgrace. Every day of a war is a disaster for some servicemen who are killed, and to some military leaders whose reputations and futures are destroyed. Military men believe in preparing for any possible attack, but prefer normally to begin and end their days in peace. The gainers in wartime are the bureaucracies, which grow enormously and then almost never shrink back to their previous size. Warfare, thus, has changed greatly from its original purposes. At its worst, warfare once meant loot, rape, and conquest. Now it means also calculated social change for both sides. James tells us that the origin of wars and all human conflicts is in sin. The warfare begins in our own being with our warfare against God, with our evil desires and lusts, our envy and our hatred. James chapter 4, verses 1 to 3. Thus, at root, the problem of war is the problem of sin, a religious problem. This does not necessarily mean that both parties or nations are evil, but rather that sin creates the crisis. Both parties can be in sin, but one can also be innocent. The religious aspect of war means that regeneration is the best strategy for peace. As men are born into the peace of God, they can then become blessed peacemakers. Our Lord, citing the Old Testament, tells us that all godly peacemakers are blessed. Matthew chapter 5, verse 9. The meek, the tamed of God, inherit the earth. Matthew chapter 5, verse 5. David tells us, "But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace." Psalm 37, verse 11. It is our calling to be God's peacemakers.